In 2018 and 19, numerous women came forward with credible allegations that Bill Hybels, founder of Willow Creek Community Church and the Global Leadership Summit, had sexually harassed or abused them. As a result, Hybels abruptly resigned from Willow Creek, but he never apologized. Instead, he labeled the women liars and colluders. So did the other leaders at Willow Creek Community Church and the Willow Creek Association, now the Global Leadership Summit. But after Hybels' former secretary, Pat Baranowski, told the New York Times her story of repeatedly being fondled and sexually harassed by Hybels, Willow Creek's leaders changed their tune. Or did they? Just last week, leadership guru John Maxwell praised Hybels in front of tens of thousands live and online attending the Global Leadership Summit started by Hybels, and the response was stunning.
I would be incredibly remiss if I would not say that every one of us in this room today are a part of the calling and the heart that he had to train leaders around the world. And I'll never forget it. I'll always be grateful. Thank you, Bill.
In response to what happened at the summit, Vonda Dyer, one of the victims of Hybels' abuse, told the Roys Report, years after the truth about Hybels' treatment of women came to light, throngs of Christian leaders still choose to honor a man who abused his power, exploited women in multiple ways, and defrauded the church when he took his money and went silent. I never imagined that leaders once held as ethical examples would stoop so low, dishonoring the abused while honoring the abuser. What should we make of what John Maxwell did, and as Christ followers, how should we respond? Welcome to the Roys Report, a podcast dedicated to reporting the truth and restoring the church. I'm Julie Roys. Joining me today is Lance Ford, an author, pastor, and director of restoration resources at the Roys Report. Lance, welcome. So glad you could join me.
Good to be with you as always, Julie.
So Lance, I want to thank you for getting on this podcast kind of last minute. We just got this video of John Maxwell and the things that he said. And I mean, honestly, it's just shocking to me that he would praise a disgraced leader, but not just disgraced, but an abusive one. I mean, as many as 10 women that he sexually harassed or abused. He's never apologized. And John Maxwell is talking about how great he is. I mean, what you just heard, and we're going to hear more of what John Maxwell had to say. We'll hear the whole thing that he said, and actually some of the other bits from the Global Leadership Summit. I would have expected somebody to come out and apologize, like David Ashcroft, who's the president of the Global Leadership Summit. Nobody came out. Craig Groeschel, who was there, didn't come out and say, hey, wait, whoa. That does not express the feelings of the summit on this. But nobody said anything. When you heard what I just played in that open, what were your thoughts?
Well, the first thought I had was when I forget the exact precise words that Maxwell used, but basically it was every one of us here, we've really been touched by Bill Hybels. And I thought, if Vonda Dyer was sitting in that room, would she have said that? Would these other women that with these credible allegations, would they have said that? Would the people that were on Willow Creek staff directly under report to Bill Hybels and have reported abusive leadership, would they have said that? And so, yeah, I was really taken back. But I would say this, folks can go back and listen to that. It was a tempered applause. They didn't bring the house down, which I think meant that a lot of the folks probably there were like, yeah, okay, I guess we're supposed to clap to that. It wasn't some rousing applause. But the first thing I thought about was the victims.
Me too, because Vonda has become a friend. I mean, we're not close friends, but I mean, through this process of talking to her, I have so much respect for her. I mean, she is a sharp woman, and I'm going to read her full statement soon in this podcast. But she has been just a champion through this, and has operated with so much grace and so much poise. But it's got to be infuriating to these victims because they felt like even though Willow Creek did an entire investigation, came out with basically saying the women's reports were credible and that the abuse was far worse than we imagined. I heard that when Pat Baranowski gave her story, not just of the sexual harassment and abuse, but then how he turned on her and the cruelty that she was treated with. Literally, there were elders in the room who put their head down on the table and just sobbed and just sobbed. And yet they never I went to I went to the I don't even it was like a lament service, and I thought they were gonna come clean and say from the stage, oh, it was just the weirdest thing. It was like, "Let's all have a time of lament for our sins." And I'm like, "Our sins? Wait, what? I didn't sexually harass or abuse any women." It was just bizarre and so hurtful to these victims. So they feel like they've never gotten a proper apology from Willow Creek. They've never heard the words that they needed to hear from the stage. And the Global Leadership Summit, who used to be the Willow Creek Association, they did some I mean, we have representatives, evidence that representatives went to some of these host sites soon after it came out what Bill Hybels had done, or at least the allegations at that point, and called the women liars and colluders to these host sites to keep them hosting the Global Leadership Summit. So you can see why these women would feel like they need a little something really owning it, and yet this is what we hear.
It's really egregious, to say the least.
It really is. Well, I know that you're not a huge fan of the Global Leadership Summit or John Maxwell and his leadership paradigm, which you would blame for a lot of the things that are going on right now. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah, it definitely is. And, I'm not saying anything about John Maxwell's character. I don't know him. But I definitely, I personally, on my journey as a pastor and a leader, and I've been in what most people term vocational ministry over 40 years. And so, I was absorbing everything that came out of John Maxwell's ministry and all of his books, just like so many of my contemporaries back in the early 90s, for several years. But as in my journey through it, there was a point where I started saying a lot of this stuff just doesn't jive with what Jesus said and the trick that Jesus called for us to go forward in. And at the same time, I was also very much feeding off of Willow Creek and Willow Creek's leadership systems. So I was deep into all of that, and even as a young pastor over 30 years ago, I was starting to see a lot of this is not adding up. And the mantra I believe that some pastors think it's somewhere in the scriptures, the most famous mantra from John Maxwell, everything rises or falls on leadership. It's treated like it's a gospel. And it's my belief is that everything in the church rises or falls on the headship of Jesus, not on the leadership of man.
And this is really what a lot of people have been calling sort of an idolatry of leadership. And I remember talking to Vonda, and she said, Julie, everything at Willow, everything, it was all about leadership, 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 leadership. It was a cult of leadership. And I felt like that was what we worshiped half the time, was this leadership model. And yet you said, and I encourage people to go back, we have it on our YouTube channel. It was a killer, absolutely killer message that you gave at Restore in 2023, I think it was. It's the system, stupid. And you talked about this leadership system that really is mimicking the kingdom of man. It is a corporate value system. It is not a biblical or godly value system. And so should we be surprised in a way that somebody who was a big celebrity, a big success, built a big church and got lots of followers and had this global leadership summit, which I remember it was written up in the Chicago Tribune, which, I'm in the Chicago area. So, we were very familiar with the Global Leadership Summit, but it was called the best business summit there is. Like, if you want to be a leader in business, you should go to this. Not even Christian, but the best business summit. And they had, people like Tony Blair. And I mean, it was
Oh,
huge. Bono came.
Bill Clinton. Yeah,
Yeah.
Bono. Bill Clinton. And Neutron Jack Welch was one of the frequent guests. Carly Fiorina. I mean, you could go on and on and on. And so it didn't matter whether these people made claims to being Jesus followers or not. These principles were just imported, and thousands upon tens of thousands of pastors, not just from North America, but around the world, drank this stuff like Kool-Aid. Now, when Willow Creek faced its crisis directly in 2018 with Bill Hybels, well, you just mentioned like that lament service. Their elders did not know how to lead whatsoever. They could not lead. They were not equipped to lead by the very, and they were a product of the leading leadership, organization in the church world that had influenced more churches. I don't think it's even arguable. Willow Creek had greater influence upon what we even see today, which I call the neo-attractional church. Still, their legacy is in that. Craig Rochelle, who now leads the Global Leadership Summit, he came directly out of all of that. The reason I say it's the system, stupid, is because they haven't changed the system. It reminds me of a song by The Who from the 1960s called Won't Be Fooled Again, and there's this great line in there. It's talking about the man all the way through the song, and then at the end, there's just this line. It says, "Meet the new boss, same as the old boss." And that's exactly what happens. You will hear churches go through a crisis, or Christian organizations, ministries go through a crisis, and they'll say, we need new leadership. But they don't mean we need new leadership. They mean we need a new leader. We need a new hero, solo heroic leader to come in. And so it's as if they have learned nothing. And you saw this at this past Global Leadership Summit. I don't think any of the lessons have been learned.
No. And the thing that's shocking to me, absolutely shocking, this is a failed leadership system. Like, failed. The founder is completely disgraced. He has never, ever owned anything. And everybody that talks about what happened at Willow, that there was a system of no accountability, no transparency, and fear and intimidation. That's what led. That's the leadership model, just so people understand. So they're going to the Global Leadership Network or the Global Leadership Summit, and training for what? Like, I mean, who goes to a completely, I mean, it'd be like going to an Enron conference on how to invest. I mean, I just don't get it. I don't get it. It's like they have this huge system they built, and it was a great entertainment model, and everybody came, and a great business. Hey, we all want to be, and it's corporate. It's not biblical. And so we're going to go through it. We're going to look at some of the things just surrounding John Maxwell, but it's so, I think, typical, and just it really shows you what this conference is about. And I mean, it's been driving me crazy for years. But then when I heard these egregious statements by John Maxwell and nobody doing anything about it, I was like, we have to talk about this. So I want to play that so people understand the setup for all of this is that John Maxwell is being given a legacy award by the Global Leadership Summit. So first, David Ashcroft, the president of the Global Leadership Network, comes out and says some somewhat over-the-top things about John Maxwell. But then they have like this whole video, pre-produced video. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I just want to play like a part. You're going to love this part with your favorite line in it. We'll put it that way.
I know that line's going to be in there, and I haven't even heard it yet. So I know that line's going to be in there.
Absolutely. Here it is.
When I started off as pastor of a little country church, and I began to study successful people, I came to the conclusion that everything rises and falls on leadership.
Okay, there it is. And you know what got me about that? It doesn't say, and I started studying scripture for what is the model that we should use. No, it was like, I started studying successful people.
Yeah, and it's what's crazy is that, and my whole life is around pastors and church leaders. It's there's a lot blinders onto this stuff now. It's
Mm,
just some people call it a leadership addiction. You mentioned that. I think I mentioned leadership addiction, obsession in my book Unleader, but it really is a drunkenness. There's a drunkenness and there's a stupor that uh, that just gets inside people around leadership. It's a $50 billion industry.
mm,
And so you go to these pastor conferences like this, these church leadership conferences, you will barely even hear the word servant. And in fact, I've even listened to some of these messages before and just sat down and counted the times that the word leader versus the word servant is mentioned, and it's usually 20 to 1.
mm,
It's just it's not the concept, and the word leader in the New Testament is used, depending on the translation, anywhere from 5 to 7 times. And when it's used by Jesus, it's not he's not complimenting it. He's not saying good
mm,
stuff about it. And yet it's become the thing that we think that we're supposed to be about, and we've just left being a servant in the dust. It's all about leadership.
hmm. Well, this video that was produced ends with, I would say, pretty, uh, it hits it borders on worship to me of John Maxwell. I mean, it is really, I think, over the top. So I don't know if you're familiar with the transformation table, the program that he does, but 14 million people, that's a lot that have gone through it. I don't know what the impact has been, but this certainly with the music and the effect and everything, got a standing ovation for John Maxwell. And I'm just curious for you, seeing the impact and feeling the way you do about what he's training people to do. How does that make you? I mean, how does that strike you?
Here's the thing. Is the everyday Christian, most of the folks sitting in the pews on a given Sunday, um, a lot of them have never even heard of John Maxwell.
Mhm.
They just do not realize that if they walked into their pastor's study, you're, they're going to see John Maxwell's books in the majority of pastors today that spend much time on their leadership edge, trying to sharpen their leadership. John Maxwell is the guru. I mean, he's the guy, has been for 30 years or more. So he has had a huge influence, just as Bill Hybels has, and just as Rick Warren has, on what you see on Sunday morning, on the product that you see Sunday morning, and on the focus that so many pastors have today, which I would dare say that it's more on leadership than it is on discipleship. Now, I
Mm,
mentioned servantship earlier, but the bottom line is what Jesus called us to do as pastors is not to build churches. In fact, Jesus said that's his job. He said, I'll build my church. You
mm,
go make disciples. But the majority of pastors today are so engrossed with leadership in building churches that discipleship and servantship gets left in the dust. Now, I say all that to say the bottom line is, are we making disciples? We are in trending decline in North America in the church. We have more bigger churches today than we ever have, but we have less cumulative people in the church
mm.
than we ever have, as far as trends. So we've been on a growth trend for decades and decades and decades, but that has slowed over the last decade or so. Even though we're spending so much money and so much obsession and so much time on leadership. And so once again, I'm not here to say, and I know Julie, we're not here to say John Maxwell, quote, is a bad guy. But we have to analyze the data and we have to analyze the effect and say, is North America in greater shape church-wise because of all of this attention and money and effort put in to leadership vis-a-vis John Maxwell's stuff. And it's not a hard answer. It's like, no, we're not getting closer to disciple making and making people more Christ-like with all this leadership obsession that we've had.
And we have an obsession with putting people on a pedestal. And that's exactly what I see happening here. It's a little gross, but this is what Craig Rochelle has to say.
You are the single best teacher and model of servant leadership in our lifetime. Not an overstatement. The single best teacher and model of servant leadership in our lifetime. And
that's a superlative statement. Any thoughts on that?
So this term, servant leadership, which is used a lot, it was coined by Robert Greenleaf. And Greenleaf had a lot of good things to say. He was trying to get things in the correct focus, but most people that use this term servant leadership have no clue what they're talking about. In fact, I don't think it's helpful because we always have to tag everything with leadership. Why is it not good enough just to say servants? Be a servant. But we have to say, no, be a servant leader. We always got to get that leader thing in. And for Craig Rochelle to say that John Maxwell has been a great teacher of servant leadership, I would really push back on that. Because once again, the leadership systems that are purveyed by Maxwell always focuses on, it starts with one person that is this great visionary, this great leader that runs the ship. And you can read any of his books. I mean, his biggest book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. These are laws. And even when he teaches them, he says, why are there 21? And he'll say, because there's not 20 and there's not 22. And why are they laws? Because they're laws. And people just drink it. It's another one of these super memes. You know, it's just like, oh, well, that's what he said, so that's fact. And it's so many of those principles within the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Don't even try to refute them. They're irrefutable. So many of those do contradict the ways and means of servantship, by Jesus.
So can you give me an example of one of these laws that you feel just doesn't add up?
Let's just use one that's kind of in the middle of the big 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. So number 9 in the list is the law of magnetism. And you remember when Jesus talked about us having magnetism, don't you?
Yeah, I missed that.
Don't you remember that?
I missed it.
So it's the law of magnetism, which the subtitle, the principle is people are attracted to leaders that possess the qualities they admire. Now, what this does is this creates, when you're drinking this stuff, it makes you want to be that person. I have to be someone. If I'm going to be a leader in this church, I need to be someone that people admire so they'll follow. Well, when you read the epistles, you read Paul's language. In fact, I believe Paul might pull out the cat o' nine tails and start slinging it if he was to hear this.
Yeah.
We are not to try to... This is one of the flaws in all of this, because it always is man-centered.
Yeah.
It's you've got to become all of this so that you draw people to you, because you're to be this magnetic leader. But what does the scriptures teach? No, actually, we're supposed to raise Jesus up so people are drawn to him, correct?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking when you said that. You know, Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto myself. Not if you're having a magnetic personality, you'll draw all men to yourself and then somehow to me.
Yeah. And that's it. It becomes so man-centered. The pressure to become this great leader, this is why so many of these young pastors, they fall, because you can't misstep as far as being a leader. You've got to do these things perfectly. And you've got to have this magnetism that will draw people. In fact, my guru, one one of the chief guys that was one of my mentors when I was pastor, and a guy that I love and admire today. But I remember the spot. I was visiting his city, thousands of miles away from my city, when I was a young church planter, and I remember this moment. You know how those markers are. You just remember where you were
Yeah.
at. I remember where I was in the car. I remember this. I asked him, what's the most important thing in church planting? And he asked me, do you really want to know? And I said, yeah. It's like, yeah, give me the good stuff. And he said 2 words, the guy. And he probably saw kind of a dumbfounded look on me. He said, do you understand what I'm saying? I said, I think. He said, it's the guy. You're the guy, Lance. You're the guy. So that's the most important thing. Not, following Jesus, not, bringing a core team of people that seek the face of God, that distributed leadership, distributed intelligence, and the giftings of everybody cumulative. No, it's the guy. And that is the way it is today. That was 35 years ago for me. But that's still what these guys are taught today. You're the guy. And it's summed up in this type of stuff that is taught ad nausea by John Maxwell and people like him.
It's so other than what Christ was. I mean, it was all about losing yourself. And then we would find him. And it reminds me, I remember I asked Kay Arthur, who to me would be somebody I really looked to because of her character that I saw when I saw her up close. And I asked her, how do you stay, focused on the Lord in this kind of a space? And she said, you always have to remember that you're there to serve. You're there to serve. And she told me a story about John Stott and how once he was visiting and he was in the kitchen of somebody's home, but they had servants there. It was in another country, I think South America. But anyway, he spilled something and he went and got a broom and started sweeping it. And the servant came in and was like, no, I'll take care of that, kind of embarrassed. And he's like, no, I will take care of it. And she said that he always, he never wanted to lose that kind of servant idea, because when you do that, you become a different person. And I feel like these guys are getting so puffed up. And I want to play this next clip because it was just, to me, it just spoke of the hubris of this leadership stuff, which just makes me, this is why I could never go to one of these. I'd probably like throw up, but here we go.
To this day, I can tell you what we learned back in 1996, that leaders are like eagles, and you don't find eagles in flocks. They don't flock together, and they have great vision, and they rise higher in the storms, and they renew themselves, and you shouldn't run with the chickens when you're created to soar like eagles.
Where's that in Scripture?
No, I don't remember seeing it, but once again, Craig Rochelle is emphasizing there is that, it's lonely at the top, leaders or eagles, they don't hang, they're by themselves, they're the one with vision. And see, that's the other thing, was this whole idea of visionary, being the visionary. And that's another thing that just seeped in 30-something years ago. And as if it was scripture that you are the visionary. Look, Jesus is the visionary. There's no great secret of the vision for your church. The vision of your church is go forward and make disciples. Love people. Love God with your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbors yourself. Make disciples. Make service. Be a servant. Let that be your identity. But all this visionary language and everything comes in. That's what Rochelle is pointing to. And so, yeah, you're gonna really struggle to find it. In the New Testament, you're just not gonna find it.
Yeah, and we attended, my husband and I attended Willow Creek in the late 80s, early 90s, and honestly, I have some wonderful experiences from Willow Creek, but I do remember them talking about in the church planting and when they would talk about, strategizing to build new ministries, it was always about this point person. You always got to get the point person.
Yep.
And I'm just like, wow. I mean, and then you're like, am I a point person? Well, I was a woman, so I couldn't be a point person. Even in an egalitarian church, it was kind of funny. But yeah, it was just really an awful lot on your shoulders, and who you have to be instead of who God is, which is one reason why I think we ended up at a church with a really very, very non-magnetic pastor. But he walked in the power of the Spirit, and the Lord built his church. So it was kind of cool. So, okay, I just want you to here's at the kind of the end of the whole, he gets the award, and you'll see the reception John Maxwell gets. And I'm not saying we shouldn't honor people or honor leaders, but again, it's to me just more of this cult of celebrity. But here it is.
Thank you. On behalf of leaders around the world, John Maxwell, I present you the Lifetime Leadership Legacy Award. And one more time, leaders around the world, would you please help me welcome my hero and my friend, John Maxwell.
So again, he gets a big standing ovation, a lot of honor, and we do want to give honor, but again, it smacks of celebrity a bit to me.
It's fine to honor people, and look, I know that we're going to get some criticism on this one, on this episode, because there's so many pastors that just, think that John Maxwell hung the moon. But the point, once again, is you have to go back and critically analyze, objectively analyze the content of what's being taught through these systems, and the pressure. That's the thing about it, Julie, is the pressure that this puts on pastors and their families and leaders, once again, to live up to being all that, and a bag of chips. It's really is on you. And all the while, Jesus said, my burden is what? My burden is light. My yoke is what? It's easy. It doesn't mean that leadership doesn't have pressures, but it doesn't have the man-made pressures that we import upon and create this burden. That's why I wrote a book called The Atlas Factor, is because we try to be Atlas when all along Jesus is the Atlas.
Well, now we're going to get to these comments that were so egregious by John Maxwell, where he addresses, and actually Craig Groeschel made reference to this in his introduction of Maxwell, how he was there in the founding of the Global Leadership Summit, which again was Willow Creek Association at the time. He says, with our founder. And of course, the founder was Bill Hybels. So then John Maxwell, in his first statements, talks about Bill Hybels.
I want to teach, but I have to say this. And Craig referred to it just very briefly. In 1991, I was in Dallas having dinner with my precious dear friend, Bill Hybels.
All right, let me just stop it there. Precious dear friend, Bill Hybels. I get that you may love somebody who has been disgraced, but in a public setting, to call him your precious dear friend, that seems inappropriate to me, given what Bill Hybels has done and his failure to own it. Lance, what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's a lack of taste, and once again, it goes back to it's a lack of concern about the victims. And think about this. This is on the stage. This is on Bill Hybels' stage. This is coming from ground zero, from where so much of his abuse was perpetuated. The lack of cognizance about that is just it's unimaginable to me. These are supposed to be smart people. These are supposed to be the smartest people in the church, and they don't have any better awareness than to realize what they're saying and where they're saying it from. So it's distasteful at best, and it's uncaring at worst.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Lacks compassion.
But it does show. It shows. What kind of leadership model do we have here, where you're a celebrity because you built something great, and let's not even look at who you harmed in the process. Let's just overlook that and talk about how great you are. He continues.
It was in that dinner hour that the Global Leadership Summit was birthed in his heart. It was birthed in his heart.
Wow. And again, birthed in his heart. Like, this is a beautiful thing. I mean, it's stunning to me that we would talk about him that way after all that's happened.
Yeah. Well, it's the continuation of what we've already talked about. It's just more and more of it.
Said, okay, we'll do it together. And so the first summit, I was with him, and it was very much of a success. I knew it would be a success.
Success. Man, this is so American, isn't it? I mean, success.
Yeah, it is, because, I mean, you see those words in the New Testament over and over, that this is what we're supposed to be shooting for. Big success, right? Great leadership. This is what, right? I mean, it's so far away from hitting the target of what Jesus called us to do.
Absolutely. I'll keep playing.
Then he looked at me, he said, well, let's do it again next year. And I said, you do it again next year. You need to have other leaders. You need to expose them to the best leaders in the world. That's exactly what he did.
Again, to me, this sounds very worldly to me. The best leaders in the world. The best leaders. It's all about leaders and the best. Not about the most godly. I just wonder, I wonder in God's economy who he looks at as the best.
Well, Jesus gave us the answer to that question. So it's the servant, right? That's the one that he looked at as the greatest. In fact, it's the Greek word. It's not even the Greek word diakonos that we use for deacon or slave. It's the word doulos, which is the word servant, which Kenneth Wiest, a New Testament scholar, said it's the most abject servile term in the Greek language.
And the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Wow. I'm going to keep playing.
And I would be incredibly remiss if I would not say that every one of us in this room today are a part of the calling and the heart that he had to train leaders around the world.
This part, this part, I just can't, because again, thinking of all the harm that he's done to human beings.
Yeah, well, it's cognitive dissonance, right? I mean, that's what you're seeing on that stage right now, and in that audience
around the world. And I'll never forget it. I'll always be grateful. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, buddy.
Wow. And you're right that there is some tentativeness there in the audience. And there's a few people on that front row that you can see that are kind of like, what? What's going on?
Yeah, you can really sense that.
But at the same time, if you watch the whole talk that he does, then at the very end, he gets a standing ovation again. Another standing ovation. So, for whatever people thought of it, they apparently overlooked it and, again, just give him another standing O. And I'm just still stunned that I did reach out to the Global Leadership Network. They have not gotten back to me. If they do, I can include that. But I mean, at this point, I have not heard back from them. I also reached out to Maxwell's group and said, does he have any comment? So far, have not heard back from him as well.
Well, there's something in play here, Julie. It's a term called abstraction. And what happens with abstraction is you're removed, you're getting the benefit of something, and you're removed from the cost of what it took to give you that benefit. So an example is, I'll just give an example. So we have a bit of land. We had a little hobby farm years and years ago when we lived in Missouri, and we've got some land right now. Well, my wife has always pushed me to, she wanted to get a couple of cows that we could raise and then butcher. And I'm like, I can't do that. And for years, she's been like, where do you think that meat comes from that we get from Publix or Kroger or whatever? Where do you think that comes from? I'm like, I don't want to hear it. I'm not looking in the eyes of that animal and I'm benefiting from it. Well, the same way. And look, I mean, I've got one of these, you've got one of these. We know, I mean, we're implicated in where these come from and who makes these and even the minerals it takes to, but we don't see that when we use it. It's abstraction. And that's what's happening in that room right there is they feel like they've had a benefit from Bill Hybels and from John Maxwell in this and that, regardless of what it's cost and what it continues to cost people. So that's a sinful and egregious thing on the part of the contemporary church today for raising up this new idol called leadership.
Well, I want to get away from the abstraction, and I want people to hear directly, and I want you to hear what the impact was on Vonda Dyer, what happened to her. And then, again, this is just one of the victims, but she had given a talk at Dallas Seminary along with her husband, Scott Dyer. So you're going to hear from both of them here, and you'll hear the impact of what Bill Hybels did.
I had no idea that the church that I loved would not believe me and the 9 other women as claims mounted. I had no idea that the church would continue to believe the pastor in question, even though years of allegations had been swirling and brought to their attention with no action taken. I did not imagine they would assassinate my character publicly. I was naive and could not imagine being persecuted, slandered, lied about, and continually bullied by the church on a global scale for reasons I may never fully know.
They believed him and called my wife a liar in front of the church we loved and had given our lives to help build. And then they told the entire global church community that she was a liar. My wife, who has done nothing but love and serve and sacrifice herself for the church and live her life with the utmost integrity, had a cloud of suspicion placed over her that was incredibly unfair, unwarranted, untrue, and unkind. And by connection, that cloud was placed over me as well.
This is painful to hear. That not only, and this is what I've heard from so many survivors of abuse, they can wrap their head around the fact that there was one bad apple. They can wrap their head around the fact that there was a man who did something evil to them. What has been so hard for them is that the people around him, and we know for Bill Hybels, they got up there and called the women liars, the elders, the lead pastors. Hybels, when he resigned, called them liars and colluders. And when she says on a global scale, there were messages that went out to all the churches around the world, which have never, ever been publicly taken back. And now we see John Maxwell get up there and praise Bill Hybels. Never do I see anywhere in Scripture where we are to protect the powerful, where we are to protect those who have sinned. Over and over and over, I read in Scripture, we are to protect the vulnerable. We are to be a voice for those whose voices have been silenced. To get up on the stage and do what he did is incredibly egregious. And so I would call on John Maxwell today to make a public statement apologizing for what he did, and also speaking to these women who were abused and distancing himself from Bill Hybels. But I'll be honest, even if he did that, I'm not sure I would believe it. I would believe he's sorry because he got caught saying what's in his heart, and clearly no compassion for these women.
Totally agree with you, Julie. And we have seen in case after case, and we've talked about it, other people talk about it, it's like there is a playbook, but you see this happen over and over and over where these leaders are treated with this honor with no care whatsoever for people that have been abused and victimized. And that just flat out is not the heart of the Good Shepherd. It's really the heart of hirelings, because what a hireling does is a hireling uses the sheep for his own uses, his own devices, and then tosses them aside, tosses the body aside, sometimes under a bus, right?
Yeah. I want to read, Vonda gave me a full statement after she heard this. And literally, it took her 24 hours to even come to terms with it and to get the statement to me. But I want to read it in its entirety so people can hear it. I am disappointed and defeated, but not surprised by the continued response of these leaders and churches to Bill Hybels' sexual, verbal, and emotional abuse, his gross lack of leadership, and moral corruption. Years after the truth about his treatment of women came to light, throngs of Christian leaders still choose to honor a man who abused his power, exploited women in multiple ways, and defrauded the church when he took his money and went silent. He got a big golden parachute, by the way, folks. I never imagined that leaders once held as ethical examples would stoop so low, dishonoring the abused while honoring the abuser. From the beginning, I could not believe that anyone who truly knew what Hybels did to his own family, to known victims, and to those still unknown, would publicly call him a dear friend and thank him. Yet this continues, with no public or private apology from him. The collapse of Bill Hybels' moral compass, the Global Leadership Summit, and of Willow Creek has left a profound and grievous scar on the local and global evangelical community. This applause and hero worship are not only a disgrace to the Christian community, but a scarlet letter on the church's head.
It's well said by Vonda. Yes, well said.
I don't even think I can add anything to that. That was tremendously well said. So the amazing thing is that after John Maxwell honors Bill, again, throwing the victims under the bus, honoring, again, a disgraced leader, he actually talks immediately after this. His talk is on legacy. Legacy. Unbelievable. And here's a slide from his actual talk. I will be bigger on the inside than the outside. Character matters. Follow the golden rule. People matter. Value humility above all virtues. Perspective matters. Travel the high road. Attitude matters. Teach only what I believe. Passion matters. I mean, the first one just kills me. The character matters and the people matter. But I guess if you're a sex abuse victim of Bill Hybels, you don't matter.
Because once again, look at everything Willow Creek's done. Look at the worldwide impact Willow Creek has had. So this just galvanizes the fact that there is a immeasurable level of tone deafness going on here among not just these leaders, but the crowd and all of the watchers around the world that just don't care about the broken, that literally would snuff out a waning wick and would go ahead and crush a bruised reed, which we know that Jesus was just the opposite of all of that.
So then the rest of his talk is, his other points are equally ironic in light of all that. So be salt and light, finish well. Consistency matters. Wow.
Well, and right there with that one is that play the infinite game, that last one, legacy matters. What I would put across there, just like in bold and in red, is context matters. You know, it's like, come on. And look, every one of these points given standing alone in the right context, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. We should be all this. We should do, but context matters. And the the grief here on this, and once again, I'm sure that we're going to get detractors on this one, Julie. They, oh, well, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. No, this stuff does matter. What we're pointing out, it is relevant, because once again, the addiction and the idol that leadership, that the bottom line has become. And this is what people will excuse so many of these abusive leaders, such as the Mark Driscolls and the Robert Morrises. And we could just, now we could just name. So, well, but look, they had such great, they created such great churches, or they, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, blah, 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 blah. All this type of stuff. Look, Jesus really does come down on this stuff. This context does matter in this. And really, this is, the more I think about it, the more agitated I become, because it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable what took place here. It should be unacceptable.
It is, absolutely. And I hope that there's a public backlash, a major public backlash. I hope more than that. What bothers me so much is that people still go to these. They still go. And it's driving me crazy. And John Maxwell, I never had a beef with John Maxwell. I didn't really, I read one of his books when I was on staff at a church, and I got stuff out of it. But with John Maxwell, what really was eye-opening for me was that several years ago, in 2019, there was a pastor by the name of Jeremy Foster. He was the pastor of a mega church in Houston called Hope City Church. It had been one of the fastest growing churches in America, if not the fastest growing church in America. It happened to be a church that was a member of the Association of Related Churches, or ARC. And if you followed our reporting, you know how many sexual scandals have been with ARC. This guy had an affair with some woman outside the church. I believe she's a masseuse, and I'm guessing was his masseuse. Had an affair with her. When he got caught, then he confessed it, stepped down from his position, married his masseuse, left his wife and children, and the hurt of his children. In fact, we published an article. His daughter has put some stuff up on Instagram, and it is, wow, what he did to these children. It is heartbreaking. So this man who is unfaithful to his wife, where does he end up? As the chief marketing officer at John Maxwell's organization. Character matters. Legacy matters. The hypocrisy of this. I don't buy John Maxwell anymore. I really don't. What he has done, what he did in hiring Jeremy Foster is egregious. And now he's followed it up with these statements about Bill Hybels. He needs to repent. And Jeremy Foster should not be. I don't know if he's still on his organization. It wasn't really published. The only reason we knew about it is he showed up at a conference, and everybody was like, somebody recognized him and said, "Oh my word, do you know about this?" That's how we knew, because it really wasn't published at Maxwell's website.
Well, all this stuff adds up, and once again, and we're not looking for perfection, but the thing is the larger platform you have, the larger responsibility you have. You really do, because, and this is one of John Maxwell's laws within his 21 irrefutable laws of leadership is that law of influence. And John Maxwell, you have great influence. And so look, we're not here to crucify John Maxwell, but I would just reiterate, Julie, what you said earlier. Would call upon John Maxwell to sit down and really reflect and come back and make a statement for these survivors and make an apology and just ask forgiveness from your heart, not because you got caught, not because it was, projected out there everywhere, but really give it a good think. Look to the heart of Jesus, and what would Jesus have you do in this matter?
I appreciate that. That is a pastoral response, Lance. I think I'm still a little angry over it. But I'm not sure the anger is misplaced.
No. I
This,
mean, be angry and sin not, and there is a righteous indignation that still pushes us to do what we do. But the bottom line is always, and I know your heart, Julie, you know my heart, our heart is restore. Report the truth, restore the church. That's the mantra of the Roy's Report. So John Maxwell, we want in this matter, we're looking for restoration, but help restore some healing to these women and recognize what you did. That's what we're asking for.
yeah. And when we're talking about leadership, isn't like a key component of leadership love and care for the sheep? That's
Always.
as I look at Jesus, that is the number one. And so we need to come back to being like our master and looking like him, and our churches looking like him, and our pastors looking like him. So I do pray that there is a better resolution, and I pray that I hear back from them, and that
would be great.
it would be wonderful, and maybe John would want to come on this podcast and discuss some of the things that we brought up. I think they're worthy of discussion, and it may be a little bit of a challenge to the system that he's promoting, but iron sharpens iron. So that would be my prayer. That he would come on and that we could talk more about this, and that maybe he could own publicly and apologize for what he did. And maybe some of the leaders of the Global Leadership Network, David Ashcroft, Craig Groeschel, we'd love to hear from you too. Folks, thank you so much for watching this and for being a part. We really appreciate it. Lance, thank you so much for taking the time kind of last minute to jump on this podcast. I really appreciate it, and your insights, as always, just so clear, so good.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for listening to The Roy's Report, a podcast dedicated to reporting the truth and restoring the church. I'm Julie Roys.
And just a quick reminder that The Roy's Report is listener supported. So if you appreciate these podcasts and want them to continue, would you please consider donating to The Roy's Report? To give, just go to julieroys.com/donate. That's julieroys.com/donate. Also, please subscribe to The Roy's Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. That way, you'll never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd really appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word about the podcast by leaving a review. And then, please share the podcast on social media so more people can hear about this great content.
Thanks so much for listening. Hope you were blessed and encouraged.
I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime.
We need to be talking about spiritual abuse and religious trauma.
This is a place where it's safe for those who have been hurt in churches. It is also a place for people to learn more about how to respond to those situations, and it is much needed.
Walking into the room, even taking the platform today, felt so safe. There was no nerves, there was no anything. There is an atmosphere of support and camaraderie and love that's here.
I think that it's really become a kind of a refuge. It's become a green pasture for people to come find one another. And so many times there's a solace. There is a restoration just in finding someone else that's experienced what you've experienced.
To know that there are people from all over the country, all over the world, who have experienced these same things, and they're uniting in Christ for healing, and I just think it's a beautiful experience.
It's not that we don't love the church, it's actually that we do love the church very, very much, and that's why we're having these kinds of conversations. It makes me feel less alone when I can talk with someone who's had a shared experience like that.
It was so cool to see, the room is packed and folks are eager to engage. They're encouraged, but they're also encouraging one another. And I believe that this is so good because the need is so great.
This conference is not only for those who've been victimized and hurt, but it is for people who want to be the answer now to what, sadly, the church in the last 30 to 40 years has covered up. And those who want to be on the cutting edge of how God is moving to vindicate, to show his justice, to bring his healing.
I just so believe in the power of story, and we need to unite. And so I just would welcome any survivor to come and know that you will be loved, you will be heard, you will be seen, and this is just a safe place for all of us.
We celebrate what God is doing. We celebrate that those that have been hurt and wounded by the church, that there's a place that they can come that's safe, and they can find healing, and they can find community, and they can be ministered to. We celebrate that. It is so amazing. And at the same time, we grieve that, right? I mean, how sad is it that we need to have a conference for people who have been wounded by the very place, the very institution that should be ministering healing to them?